go live on YouTube.
Are we good, Kristen?
We are.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Today on our agenda, we have Jackson County, which is our last county to approve for burn funding. And we will also have a discussion and a presentation on burn oversight, as well as some OHA updates today. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kristen.
Thank you, Blue, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Don Hefner, so I will be assisting with facilitating today's meeting on behalf of OHA. The Oversight and Accountability Council welcomes and encourages community input. Members of the public are invited to submit public comments or get on our interested parties email list by emailing ohja.measure110@dhsoha.state.or.us. That email address and more information is available on the Measure 110 OAC website. OAC members have asked that OHA and other staff who are present in the meeting space introduce themselves in the chat. Please share your role with the agency, and if you are a subject matter expert, your area of expertise. And with that, can we take roll?
Hello, everyone. If you could say here when I say your name, that would be super great. Amy. Amy, are you there? All right, I'll come back to Amy. Blue.
Here.
Blue. Carlos.
Here.
Hi, Carlos. Caroline.
Here.
Hi, Caroline. Dharma.
Here.
Hey, Dharma. Henry.
Here.
Hi, Henry. Hubert. No Hubert yet. Karen did let us know she will not be here today. Keisha.
Here.
Hi, Keisha. Leticia.
Here.
Hi, Leticia. Melinda.
Here.
Hi, Melinda. Morgan.
Here.
Hi, Morgan. Nicole.
Here.
Oh, hi, Nicole. Onisha. No Onisha yet. Ron.
Here.
Hi, Ron. Sabrina.
I'm here.
Hi, Sabrina. Zeb.
Here.
Hi, Zeb. Thanks for joining. Steve. Did Steve make it?
Yep. Here.
Oh, there's Steve. And I believe Dr. Richardson is also out this week, but he may be joining. I'm not sure. So, Amy, are you here?
Amy said that she was here in the chat.
Oh, I see Amy. Okay.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm having issues.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I'm
All
here.
right. We're at 16, and I did send a message to Hubert. I will send one to Onisha as well.
Okay, thank you, Sydney. Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Blue.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, so Steve is going to be doing our last presentation for burns, and that's for Jackson County. So I will turn it over to Steve, and I'm not sure who is doing conflicts, but hopefully somebody.
Yes, before we get started on Jackson County, are there any conflicts of interest for this county? Leticia?
Yeah, this is Leticia, and I have an actual conflict of interest with Addictions Recovery Center, and I also have an actual conflict of interest with the Pathfinder Network as of, I think, July 11th.
Great, thank you, Leticia. Just make sure you keep your camera off for this part of the presentation. Any other conflicts of interest? Okay, I will turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Blue. And we are super excited to have the last of the county regions up for
your consideration today. So Jackson County. Awesome, thank you. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we had a very robust response from Jackson County. All of the categories of services were well covered, so folks will have options in Jackson County. Next slide. A key challenge in Jackson was the amount over budget. $14.5 million out of the over and above the allocation of about $17.5 million. So that was a key challenge throughout. As you'll see when we get to the budget page, there was a couple of organizations, Rogue Retreat, who ended up withdrawing at their request, and Rogue Community Services, who were able to, by Rogue Retreat's departure from this burn and Rogue Community Services reduction in their budget, they covered a large chunk of the overage, and then the smaller organizations also contributed along the way. Next slide. Here are the concerns that you all raised and how they were addressed. Columbia Care, there was a question that Columbia Care was not at that time certified to provide substance use disorder services, and in the meantime, since their application, they completed the application process and were formally licensed by OHA to provide those services. Jackson County Health and Human Services, were they proposing to fund services that were already funded, and Jackson County confirmed that all of the staff that they have working on the Measure 110 funded services were positions that did not have another source of funding. And the community outreach educator position was funded, but that position funding is scheduled to end in December 22, and that funding for that position is accounted for in their budget by not having Measure 110 fund that position prior to December. The Clinica, there was a question on what harm reduction services our positions already funded, and they confirmed that naloxone education, distribution, screening, testing, and other harm reduction supplies. The positions represented in the Clinica's budget are all, gotta move my screen around here for a second, are all new positions not previously funded. Next slide, please. The Oasis Center of Rogue Valley, the question was, will Measure 110 funds be used to secure space that will be then rented to providers? And they confirmed that Oasis Center, the funding for housing that they have, providers will not be required to pay rent to be able to utilize those services. On Track is harm reduction only for housing clients. What harm reduction services will be offered? On Track, I think we jumped ahead in the slides.
Sorry, I'm having some screen issues here. Hold on one second.
Yep, no
It
worries.
was Oasis Center, right? I'm so sorry.
We're on Track. Yeah, you've got the right
Okay.
slide.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yep. So the question was, is On Track harm reduction only for housing? What harm reduction services are offered? They responded, they'll offer basic harm reduction supplies for emergency housing clients. They will continue to offer naloxone to all clients and refer clients to burn partners for comprehensive harm reduction services. As you saw, there's an array of harm reductions providers as part of this burn. Compass House, will Measure 110 funds be used for substance use disorder and mental health, or just SUD? And they confirmed that Compass House will use Measure 110 funding only for SUD services in accordance with Chapter 944 rules. Next slide, please. Then we work with all partially funded programs. So in those cases where the subcommittee signaled that they would only support partial funding for certain providers, we work with those providers to adjust their budgets and their service array accordingly. So for Family Nurturing Center, the council had concerns around hiring new staff and not using current staff. OAC voted not to fund supported employment, so they cut supported employment from their budget and removed any of the duplicated staffing costs. Options for homeless residents of Ashland, funding for housing only, no harm reduction. So options did not have any harm reduction budget related items. So there were no cuts there. Pathfinders funding peer services only, and they reduced their budget. And so the only remaining items were either direct peer salaries or any supports needed for those particular staff. Next slide. Rogue Community Health exclude salaries that were not in alignment with Measure 110, for instance, the therapist, team lead, therapist, UI assessor, et cetera. They removed all of those salaries, and as you'll see in the budget, there was substantial budget reductions that resulted from those cuts. Rogue Retreat reduced their overall budget, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, after consultation with local stakeholders and funders, Rogue Retreat decided to withdraw their participation in the burn, which also resulted in significant reduction in the budget. Rogue Retreat Hope University, there was concern about only funding training that would take place in Jackson County. And with OHA review, we determined that what they were offering actually was not in accordance with Measure 110. In other words, these were not services that were eligible under the grant. And so they withdrew their participation, which also resulted in about $500,000 in budget reductions. Next slide. And then the budget reconciliation process. So after the first cut of making reductions based on the OHA feedback, which you just heard, we're still considerably over budget. And so these were additional cuts that were made by providers. Addiction Recovery removed remodeling costs and one FTE in reporting data tracking staff. Columbia Care reduced their budget. And as you'll see, many of these, the form that we provided was ended up being a 19-month form. And so a number of these providers with an 18-month contract reduced their budgets in accordance to that. Family Nurturing removed $1 million in capital expense that did not seem feasible given the time parameters. Jackson County Health and Human Services shifted staffing to provide higher wages to ensure living wages for the providers that were funded under this project, but restructured for more support for community outreach and program coordination. They removed a vehicle purchase, increased Narcan supplies, and reduced the cost of data collection. La Clinica reduced their budget by delaying hiring and reducing from 18 months to 19, excuse me, from 19 to 18 months. Next slide. And then after if these continue these budget cuts, Max's mission cut from 19 to 18 months, as did Oasis Center of Rogue Valley, and delayed some hiring. On Track reduced their budget by delaying hiring, similarly reducing from 19 to 18. Options for Southern Oregon reduced their budget in the same way. Pathfinders reduced their budget by delaying hiring, eliminating some one-time startup costs for their peer drop-in center. Rogue Community Health reduced their staffing by half, also eliminated travel and training budgets. Next slide. And so here is what the budgets look like after all of this homework was completed. You see the large reductions from Family Nurturing Center, from Rogue Community Health, almost $7 million reduction, $5 million reduction from Rogue Retreat, and $500,000 for the Rogue Retreat Hope University that was not eligible for funding. So after all of those and some smaller cuts, the budget came in actually not quite 400,000 under budget. And so then that kicked in the housing contingent. So moving to the next slide. Reminder, any under budget was first to be offered for housing, and then if not, on a prorated basis. Next slide. And so these, all of that 378,000 or so was reallocated to housing additions. So HIV allowance increased our budget for housing assistance. And you'll see these budget numbers on the slide coming up. On Track will renovate their freestanding garages into studio apartments for individuals who are on the wait list for residential treatment or detox services. Options for homeless residents of Ashland received alternative funding to purchase low barrier emergency housing. As a result, they reallocated $50,000 in their original budget to renovate some of that space to make it fully ADA accessible. With additional burn funds, they will add rental assistance and add 10 low barrier emergency beds. Next slide. And here you see in green those changes to budgets for those three providers. HIV Alliance, Oasis Center, and On Track. And so at the bottom there, you'll see that the budget then zeroes out, not being over or not being under. And I think that's the last slide. Yeah, I'm sorry, this slide just confirms that it is at allocation. And thanks to Jackson County and Kristen especially for a lot of hard work to be able to reach this. And you'll see here's the final, a single burn in the final matrix, and lots of redundancy in terms of service provision. So people in Jackson County will have access to these services and will have options in provider choice. Thank you, happy to take questions.
Sabrina?
Yes, I had a question. So in the initial budget, some of the organizations were budgeting for rental costs associated with the Oasis Center, but since they're not going to be charging rent for use of their building, would that deduction be made out of their overall budgets?
Kristen, do you have that information?
Yeah, actually, none of the original budgets submitted rental line items from the Oasis Center. I think the question was just if the Oasis Center would be charging rent, and they are not. So nobody accounted for those on the front end.
Oh, I was just wondering because I evaluated that county and I thought I saw a lot of the budgets saying they wanted to provide or get funding for rental for rent out of the Oasis Center. So that's why I was asking, but thank you for clarifying that.
Welcome.
I just had a question about On Track offering basic harm reduction supplies. I am not quite sure what that means, and I would be interested in finding out.
Thanks, Blue. Kristen, do you also have that information?
Yeah, if you can give me 1 second. If there are any other questions while I'm pulling this up, you can, oh, here, I found it. Some of their basic supplies are naloxone, first aid and wound care supplies, safer sex supplies, and some other items needed to reduce risk or harm for individuals that live in their emergency housing.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
This is Ron. I'll make a motion to approve the grant agreements for Jackson County.
Seconded.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Oh, Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't have a chance to get my hand up. I was just curious, Steve, when you said that a couple of the agencies delayed hiring, what does that mean exactly? Did someone ask that question already?
Yeah, Henry, Kristen may want to jump in on this, but what we've seen in some other county region negotiations is as folks put together their original budgets, they were anticipating, the staffing costs throughout the grant period. But given the current environment that they're in, realistically, I think many of the providers are saying, we know that it's going to take some months to hire at this point, and so they've reduced the staffing costs in accordance with what they now believe is a more realistic timeline for that hiring. Does that sound right, Kristen?
Yes, that's accurate.
So what they're saying is, or what they're recognizing is that because of the shortage in mental health providers around the state, well, including peer support, like certified peer support specialists and CADCs, that realistically they don't have the people, they can't find the people to do the work initially, and so they're waiting to because of that they can reduce the costs for those folks.
Exactly, Henry. And if it takes 2 or 3 months to hire, not that they would delay recruitment, but if it's likely that it's going to take a couple, 3 months to hire, that they anticipated that delay and have reduced their budgets, believing that it's going to take that long to get any new staff on board.
Yeah, I understand that they're not intentionally delaying. They're saying there are staffing shortages that is making it difficult to find the folks to do the work.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Sydney, can you go ahead and take a vote?
Yes, and just to clarify, was it Morgan that seconded that motion?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. All right, motion to approve the grant agreements for Jackson County was seconded. Amy, how do you vote? I know she's having some, there you are. Okay, thanks, Amy, got your yes. Blue?
Yes.
Thanks, Blue. Carlos?
Yes.
Thank you, Carlos. Caroline?
Yes.
Thank you, Caroline. Dharma?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
That's okay. That's okay. Thanks, Dharma. Henry?
Yes.
Thanks, Henry. And Hubert did join us.
Yes.
Thanks, Hubert. And Karen is not here today. Keisha? Keisha, are you there?
Sorry, I was talking. Yes,
That's okay.
yes.
That's okay. Thank you. Leticia has a conflict. Melinda?
Yes.
Thanks, Melinda. Morgan?
Yes.
Thanks, Morgan. Nicole?
Yes.
Thanks, Nicole. Onisha?
Yes.
Thanks, Onisha. Ron?
Yes.
Thanks, Ron. Sabrina?
Yes.
Thanks, Sabrina. And Zeb?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. That final Jackson County vote passes with 15. Congratulations, y'all.
Right, now
Blue, this is Steve.
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, if I say a couple words when the time is right.
Go ahead, Steve, you're good.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to acknowledge this really great moment and just to thank all of you as the council for supporting us in doing this work on your behalf. As you can imagine, it was a lot of really complex and difficult work, and we didn't get it perfectly done, but we got it done with your support. And so just want to thank you as the council members, and also want to thank all of the OHA staff who really dug deep and worked in these complex negotiations to be able to get this work in front of the council. I think it's a huge amount of work. And if you recall, at one point, as we were taking a deep breath and thinking about how quickly we could get it done, knowing the urgency in the community, we had scenarios that went out as far as October, and the reality is I think we had all but 3 or 4 done before the end of July. And I'm just noting it's the 31st of August, not September. And so we were able to work together to get all of these approved before the end of August. And so just congratulations, everyone. It's a really cool moment, and just wanted to take a pause and celebrate it together.
Thank you, Steve. I want to echo those remarks, and it's absolutely wonderful that we were able to get this done. The council put in a lot of work over a long period of time, and we needed a lot of help, and we got a lot of help. I don't want to rehash the bumps in the road, but despite the bumps in the road, we were able to make this tremendous accomplishment, and to be able to benefit the people of Oregon. And it is an exciting moment, and I think everybody should take a moment and really congratulate each other and congratulate yourselves for a tremendous job of getting this done. So everybody's putting up hearts, hearts and little flowers and whatnot, bouquets and fireworks. Does anyone have any other comments? I'm sorry, Lou, I defer. My bad.
You're good, Ron. Thank you, Ron and Steve. Yeah, if anybody else just wanted to say a couple words, we have a couple minutes to do that. Keisha?
Yeah, I just echo Ron's sentiment, and I just want to thank, and Steve, I just want to thank everyone who worked tirelessly to make this happen. We had some ups and downs, but I'm just excited that we transformed the whole system. It wasn't easy, but it was doable, and thank everyone who put in mad time to make this happen.
Thank you, Keisha. And Dharma, I see your hand up as well.
I just really think it's phenomenal that we funded the last burn on International Overdose Awareness Day, and just acknowledging how much of a crisis overdose is still for our communities and how important it is that we fund this life-saving services. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that and acknowledge how important today is for us as recovery communities, but also as OAC members. Thank you.
Thank you, Dharma. I also thought it was really meaningful that we passed the last of these counties on International Overdose Awareness Day. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dawn and Shannon for our presentation on burn oversight. Sabrina.
Blue, I'll be subbing in for Dawn,
Okay.
and we'll turn it over to Shannon in a few minutes. So as we shift our attention jointly, obviously
Steve?
implementation is already well. Yes.
I do see Sabrina's hand up, and so I just want to check in and see if you want, Sabrina, you needed to speak before this presentation.
Yeah, I could definitely speak afterwards. I just had a couple of questions of unclarity about two questions, and I don't have to ask them now, but if I can have a space to ask them before we end the meeting, and maybe they can be addressed in the future, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. We can get back to your questions after the presentation. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So just marking this shift from a focus on funding to implementation, although implementation, frankly, has been going on for a while now. We wanted to review with you the process of the oversight. So it's the Oversight and Accountability Council. And so we've taken a look at that process, and we have an overview of that for you today. And as we've looked at it from our perspective, it seems like the roles and responsibilities are clearly laid out. And so again, want to review that with you today, but I think there's been concern in the past on certain aspects where roles and responsibilities weren't clear, and we think this is an area where it is clear. It's not that we won't trip over things or need to make adjustments in the future, but we think from a starting point, this looks like a clear landscape to us. And so we have a slide deck, and I'll begin and then with an overview of that oversight function, and then as we get more into the legal weeds, then I'll hand it off to Shannon, who will take over from there. All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So the oversight has everything to do with what information that the council and OHA has available to us on the performance of our grantees. And that information will come in roughly 6 forms. There's 3 of those that you're already very familiar with because we've talked about these at some length and have been in negotiation and discussion with the Secretary of State in anticipation of their ongoing auditing. So the financial information that we've discussed with you that will be coming in, that's one area where you'll have the ability to see information that would trigger oversight. The review of the service delivery data, that information that we've also talked about that will be coming in as these providers get up and running. Who are they serving? Recall time to service, reasons for denial, those types of things. And then the policies themselves, and I know there's been some concerns to make sure that providers are adhering to the rules and regulations regarding that, and those policies are meant to articulate how those providers will be adhering to those. And so the ability to receive and review that policy information will also be a valuable source of oversight information. In addition, as you know, Secretary of State is actively reviewing this process and will be delivering reports. I think the first of those is anticipated around the end of September, so about a month away. And that will be another valuable source of information, both for you all and for the agency to review how are we doing the work together and things that the Secretary of State may flag. There may be complaints that come in by agencies, by those that are being provided service. And so that information will be available to you all and to OHA. And then some of the service delivery is already regulated by OHA, by licensing, by certification. That might be at the provider agency level in some cases. It may also be practitioners at the individual service provider level. So that's information that will also be available both to the OAC and to OHA. Next slide. And then this these next few slides just reminds you of the kind of information that you will have available to you in your oversight function. As you recall, OAC directed us to, at our suggestion, develop a phased in data reporting, just so that in recognition that this work will be complicated, and to gradually implement the more complex portions of that data. So initially in phase 1, you will be seeing information about the number of clients served, the services provider, the number of denials as phase 2 kicks in. You'll also see the demographic information, real each SOGI data. And then in phase 3, that duration information that's more complicated to develop, that related to service denials and delays, wait times, and duration of services. And we will be actively reviewing that information and summarizing it and reporting it to you periodically. And based on that data reporting, you all can direct OHA to do follow-up with grantees, and you'll see in terms of the follow-up and actions how that is anticipated to play out in an agency and OAC level. Next slide. Financial information that we've talked about and that you've seen. There's a template that's standardized across all the grantees, similar to data reporting. So grantees will be reporting quarterly the expenditures. They'll report on by the various budget categories, by personnel, training, services, supplies, capital, equipment, administrative, and also by service area. So those categories of services that you all are really familiar with, from screening all the way down to outreach, supportive employment, et cetera. Next slide. And then here are all the policies that are required by each provider, and so you'll also have access to all of that information, and especially where there may be performance concerns and adherence to those required policies and procedures. This these can be a valuable tool to see how each agency has crafted the policies that they will be working under, and whether they're in congruent with the requirements of the rules and of the statute, and whether agencies are acting in accordance with their own policies. Next slide, please. And then we mentioned the real-time state audit going on and subsequent audits. So the Secretary of State is required to do, as you recall, performance audits, financial reviews, and they'll be looking at how those funds are used, the effectiveness of the funding, et cetera. Grantees must keep accurate books and records that are subject to inspection and audit by the Secretary of State. And those audits and reports will help inform your decisions on grantee monitoring. So in other words, if something's flagged by the Secretary of State, that would be an obvious opportunity for the OAC to gather more information in response. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Yeah, hi everyone. Shannon O'Fallon, Oregon Department of Justice, she, her pronouns. Nice to see everybody. To talk about now some of the maybe more boring legal stuff. So as Steve said, right, some of the Measure 110 grantees are also going to be licensed and certified by OHA. And those OHA programs, have processes for following up on complaints that come. There may be, routine reviews that happen based on, an application or reapplication cycle. And so that work will be happening in the background, just sort of in the normal course. And here's, sort of a couple examples of programs or individuals who are licensed or certified by OHA, community health workers, peer support specialists, and certain other programs. Next slide. So there'll also be a process for taking complaints related to Measure 110 grantees. Complaints can be taken through the regular Measure 110 email address. And then, a triage, there'll be sort of a triage process that takes place, right? Because the complaints that deal with grant compliance, including compliance with OAC's rules, those will be handled initially by grant administrators, right? So every grantee has a grant administrator. If there are complaints that more squarely fall within the licensure and certification category, those will go to those OHA programs. There could be complaints related to, labor issues at programs or, sort of safety things that are more appropriately handled by the Bureau of Labor and Industries, which is BOLI, or Oregon OSHA, right, that handles workplace safety. And again, this is, something common that you see at OHA. OHA is a big agency and people might file complaints about a lot of things, some of which the Oregon Health Authority, or in this case, the OAC can do something about, has jurisdiction to do something about, but also may, again, fall outside of that jurisdiction. So those need to be handed off to someone else. And right, and so the OAC's sort of legal lane here are, what's considered compliance or non-compliance with the terms of the grant agreement. And the grant agreement requires compliance with OAC rules. So those two things sort of go hand in hand. Next slide. In the grant itself, there are some tools for ensuring compliance. As I said before, there's going to be an OHA employee who is the grant administrator for all the grants that go through, a certain amount of training. There's a DAS training, is my understanding. And, at any time, OHA can request information or records from a grantee. If OHA determines that there is a performance deficiency, we can ask the grantee to cure that, and that sort of deadline to cure those deficiencies would be 14 days. If things really escalate, there can be, a demand to return funds. And then there are certain remedies for certain things that happen under the grant where the council itself can exercise certain remedies, including deciding to withhold funds or terminating the grant agreement, in a really extreme case, filing some sort of legal action against a grantee. But again, I think that's not authority that I've ever seen the Oregon Health Authority exercise over grantees. And then, if there's, sort of an imminent threat to health and safety, there's a provision that allows OAC to terminate a grant basically immediately. My experience with the Oregon Health Authority and grants is that they work with the grantee to get them into compliance, to make sure that they're meeting deadlines, sort of doing all those things, and that you sort of wouldn't move towards enforcement or more punitive things until you'd sort of tried all those other things. Next slide. So again, as I said, OHA employees are going to be the grant administrators, and under the statute, actually, OHA has certain obligations to ensure that grantees are complying with the law. Grant administrators, do common things, like I said, ensure that deadlines are met, right? So are they submitting their quarterly financial reporting? Are they submitting their data reports? Making sure that payments go out on time so grantees can continue doing the important work that they're doing. And again, sort of providing technical support. If there are questions about, terms of the grant or the rules, things like that, the grant administrator can help with that. And again, if there is a finding of non-compliance based on review of data or a complaint, that first gets addressed with the grantee. They try to work on performance improvement, and then, sort of things would escalate from there if improvement wasn't seen. Next slide. Is that it? Okay. So with that, we will see if there are any questions.
Sabrina, did you feel like you got your questions answered?
No, definitely. I think I got all of my questions answered in a format that was easily understood, and I'm what I thought was in our power authority is what was laid out in the slide. So thank you very much.
Great. And I'm assuming, I think I saw a question about whether or not the slides were going to be available. I'm sure I think they get posted, but yeah, certainly they should be provided to everybody.
Okay, Ron, and then Henry.
Yeah, thanks. That was wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. That was very clear and easy to understand. I really appreciate it. My question is around the fact that a lot of these organizations are kind of entering this kind of zone of recovery services kind of for the first time, or they're expanding into services that they haven't done before. As Henry mentioned earlier, there are going to be staffing challenges, ramp up challenges. That's why we allowed a lot of time for people to kind of get up to speed in the first cycle of before the council really. I think my understanding, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but initially we said that the first real kind of hard evaluation or review of the council of the grantees would happen at a year. And then the second would be at the 18-month period. I don't know if that's still accurate based on the kind of changes that we've made. But my question is really around kind of technical assistance and flexibility for organizations that are starting up, that are getting going. And if somebody could answer that, is there flexibility, is there technical assistance, and how will that be provided, and how would organizations access it if it were available?
Yeah, Ron, I can take that one just to start, and maybe Shannon, you want to weigh in as well. But I think first and foremost, I think from an agency perspective, at least, our kind of mindset around compliance is not gotcha. It's how do we help folks succeed? And I think especially with Measure 110 providers, and as you've described it, there's a number of those providers that are experienced and been around a long time and have done this work, but there's others who are new and getting off the ground, and it's clear that the council means to support those organizations in doing this work in a sustainable and ongoing way. And I think it's our approach, our belief to support the council and these providers, and especially for the people who need these services, to help everyone who's doing this work be successful. The second part, though, is an important part, and it also, relates to our ability as an agency to support you all and the providers, is bandwidth. And we are working to continue to hire for positions that we've already been authorized for, and we plan to request additional authorizations to bring in new staff. But this work is staff intensive, and the technical assistance and any compliance work, and without an appropriate level of staffing, and with hundreds of providers, our ability to properly support and, if need be, hold providers accountable is going to be limited by the staff available that we have. And we don't know at this point, and expect really no one has a crystal ball about how much technical support and compliance work might be needed going forward. But I think we'll I think fairly quickly understand what that looks like, and then we will work to support you by asking for the resources that we need.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that answer.
Yeah, I don't have, Ron, this is Shannon. I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you, Shannon.
Ron, do you have any other questions?
No, that was it. I just wanted to kind of get a sense of, and I appreciate that OHA is going to really lean into that, and that they're really kind of supporting the council's values regarding supporting emerging, small, diverse, culturally specific organizations, new organizations that are entering the space, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, Henry, and then Dharma.
Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude to the council and to OHA for all the hard work. I was at the Northwest Institute of Addiction Studies conference last week and saw Ron there, and want to express my gratitude to you, Ron, for the hard work, sharing the work that we're doing here on the council. I also think it's important for us to recognize that, that sense of urgency in the community of service providers, that they are seeing the overdose rates go up, and that they are working with folks, who are chronically homeless, especially in the metro, and some of those folks are really concerned about boots on the ground. They want to support the carrot and not the stick approach, and yet are worried that if we don't have some kind of, that whenever there's a big change, I think people get worried. And so, I like to hear the things that are going well, like the report on the Max's mission or whatever it was that, it stopped 100 overdoses in Southern Oregon, I think is wonderful. And so I guess my question is, where are we going to start hearing about, the number of screenings and referrals? Is that in phase 1 or in the quarterly reporting? I think it'd be helpful to start hearing, where these agencies are able to provide those screenings and referrals to services, and when that will start. Thank you.
Yeah, there may be others on the call that have better information than I do, but my understanding is that providers are required to record the numbers of services that they're providing immediately, but that initial report wouldn't be delivered to you all until after the first of the year. So I don't know that you'll have much of that information prior to that, but does anyone else have better information than I do on that?
No, that sounds right, Steve. We want to balance getting this information with also giving the providers kind of the space and the runway to get set up and get up and running and to start using these funds.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Dharma?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I was wondering that phased data, is there a timeline for the phasing of that data?
Dharma, this is Steve. And again, if someone else on the call has better information than I do, my understanding is that we have not fixed dates for those phased shifts as of now, that those will be developed, as we need to get through this phase to get all those folks across the finish line. And then we're going to work out a map of when we thought it was reasonable to kick in the next phases. So I think the short answer is no, we don't have that yet, but anticipate getting that fairly soon.
And then I had another question about like direct client feedback. Is there going to be any sort of like back channel process for us to collect feedback directly from clients of burns? Or is it all going to go directly through the burns? And I'm wondering if we can't develop some sort of reporting system that's direct to OHA or OAC, especially as a matter of equity for clients receiving services, not maybe wanting to report issues directly to their service provider.
This is Steve again. I'll take a first shot at it, but others please feel free to jump in. So right now, it's sort of what you see is what you get. That the required information within statute and rule is going to be collected from providers. As you saw, there is a channel for consumer complaints that can happen, but there's no other structured information gathering for people receiving these services. It's obviously something that the council could conceive going into the future, along with other data that you all may help you make future decisions about funding and strategy around funding. But what you see is what you get for now, is my understanding.
Great, thank you. And then I just had one last question on the SOGI data that's being collected. And I don't necessarily need this answer now, but if I could get sent maybe the policies for how they're collecting that data, if it's self-identified data or if it's based on the assumptions of providers, and ensuring that it's non-binary inclusive as well, considering our state gender marker policies.
Yeah, we'd be happy to provide that to you, Dharma. Our equity inclusion unit has spent a lot of time thinking that through, and happy to have your feedback, but we have a very structured approach that we've been developing over time about that. So we'll connect with you separately about that, and happy to follow up with a larger group if desired.
And I can confirm, Dharma, that it's self-identified. It's not whatever the provider thinks. It is what the client reports. And if they do not feel comfortable reporting that information, they do not have to do so in order to receive services.
Awesome. Shannon, did you want to go ahead of me before I ask some questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the getting feedback directly from clients. I just wanted to say, I mean, to Steve's point, like there's no process in place for that, but there are also lots of confidentiality issues that come up when you think about sort of soliciting client data and, you know, and public records and things like that. So just flagging that, that if that, you know, was something that the council wanted to put in place, there's sort of a bunch of other legal things that we'd have to think through.
Thank you for that. So I had a couple questions. The first one is just when it was discussed about the policies on each of the different issues. And then I believe that I heard that in addition to having a policy on file, the organizations would have to describe how they will adhere to those policies. I just wanted to check that was correct. And if so, is the council and or the public able to see how these organizations are describing they will adhere to these policies?
So Blue, it's Shannon. Somebody else may have something to add. I mean, I know that the rules say, right, that they have to submit the policies and procedures. The rules say that they have to implement the policies and procedures. So there's that in rule.
Yeah, I guess I was just, I thought that I'd heard that they also had to describe sort of how they will meet, adhere to those policies, which could mean creating a new housing area that is for one person so that people feel safe if they are somewhere on the gender spectrum. And I was just, is that just folded into the policy or is that something separate? Or did I misunderstand it?
I don't know. I mean, sorry, this is Shannon again. I don't know that the policies and procedures are gonna necessarily specify how they will adhere to them. Certainly they need to, but maybe we can get back to you, Blue. I mean, I don't think that the slides necessarily said that, so maybe we need to circle back on that point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I could have misunderstood what I saw in those slides. So thank you for that. And then as far as, I guess, complaints under, I know it was discussed that there's like a first level of the grant, I forgot, grant supervisors, that's not the right, you know what I mean. There's a first level in terms of who would be looking into any sort of complaints. And then there were a couple additional levels, which I'm guessing would be if that person thinks that the complaint should be escalated. And both of the other options did involve the OAC. And I was just curious at what point the OAC is made aware of these complaints. Is it only if it reaches the level of involving the OAC to possibly vote around the complaints, or are the complaints something that the OAC would be able to see even if it doesn't reach that level?
I don't know if Steve wants to jump in. This is Shannon again. I mean, I'm not sure that we've worked out, sort of that level of detail. Certainly at the point where the OAC, OHA felt like the OAC needed to take action on a grant for sure. But, as far as sort of specifically at what point would things get elevated to OAC, I think that's maybe going to be kind of a work in progress as we see how things play out. But maybe Steve wants to add something else.
Yeah, I was thinking similarly, Shannon and Blue. So, obviously anything that's related to Measure 110, you all, other than something that may be confidential for one reason or another, or protected for one reason or another, you all will have access to. And then it really comes into, bandwidth as what all do you want to know? And do we have the bandwidth to provide it all? And how quickly is that? I think the clearest example is if there's a concern that that could rise to the level where the Oversight Council would need to take action. Obviously, that needs to be provided to you all in a timely way. Beyond that, I think it's as we get into it, maybe it's just a discussion about what do you prefer, what do you need, what do you want, and can we provide it reasonably with the staff that we have.
Thank you. That is really helpful. I thought I saw another hand up, so I just want to check in if anybody else has any other questions. Okay, well, thank you, Steve and Kristen. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristen for some OHA updates.
Sure. Thanks, Blue, and thank you everyone for that helpful presentation. I believe Sydney just emailed everyone the slides, so they should be in your inboxes, but let us know if you can't find them and we'll make sure that we resend them. All right, I think we had space today to say goodbye to Walter. However, I do not see him in the Zoom unless I'm missing him somewhere. Maybe not, so we'll have to try to get him back to have everyone give him a proper farewell. I did want to note that we will be appointing 3 new members to the OAC in light of folks resigning from the council. First, we will be adding another tribal position in consultation with the tribes. We'll also be filling in the statutory position of a provider that specializes in addiction medicine. And finally, we'll have an open at-large seat, and we will be seeking someone who specializes in the field of supported employment, so that we have a council member that can speak to each of the 7 service elements in the burns. Those applications will be posted online after the Labor Day holiday, and we'll be sure to share that link with all of the council members as well as on our various listservs when it does go live. So I just wanted to make sure that you are all aware and to pause if you have any questions about that. Yes, Sabrina.
So I just wanted to make sure that I was calculating the people that would resigned. Was one Cheryl Kennedy and was the other one Dr. Awin? Were those the 2 seats that became available?
I know it was Awin.
It's 2 of the 4. So Lana Winnie, Makita Jensen, Cheryl Kennedy, and Dr. Elwin Reiki. Those are the 4 people who have left the council.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Any other questions?
I have one question. So what the fact that we're bringing on new members kind of creates in my mind kind of a recurring theme that I've brought before the council a number of times, which is some attention to organizational development, board development, consensus building, relationship building, trust building among council members, putting some effort into like doing some of that work. And having some of that facilitated organizational development happen and organizational training happening for the council. And I'd just like to put that on the table.
Thanks, Ron. I know that's something that I have asked for as well. And so hopefully we can see if that's possible to do moving forward. I think it would be really helpful for all of us, especially bringing in new members as well. And I see that Henry has a question. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, I just want to advocate for that also. I think that's a really wonderful suggestion. It was, it's weird that I haven't seen most of your feet. I don't know if you guys have feet, but it was nice to see Ron in person last week because now I know Ron has feet. So if there's a way that all of us could get together in a room, I think it just creates a sense of camaraderie or, a sense of connection that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. So
like, oh my God, did Tyler already get loaded before?
I don't know what that was, but yeah, I just would appreciate meeting all of you in person at some point.
Well, this might be a great opportunity to do that with some new council members. I think the final update from OHA is that tomorrow the Rules Advisory Committee, or the RAC, will meet from 3 to 5 p.m. It will be live streamed on YouTube, and I believe Sydney sent out that link earlier today. We will be proposing to make 3 changes to the Chapter 944 rules that the council voted on back in June. But as a reminder, the first change is to clarify the definition of supported employment. And the other 2 changes are to add expungement and mobile outreach services to the burns for the new year, starting in January. So those were all changes that you voted to bring forward earlier this summer, and we will be meeting with the RAC tomorrow afternoon to try to finalize those. I think that is the end of our OHA update. So I will turn it back to you, Blue.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, and so that is the end of our meeting today. Sabrina, go ahead.
Yes, I have 3 questions, so please bear with me. And you can respond to them now, or if somebody can get me back by email, or if we could put them on the agenda, maybe to talk about these items the next time we meet. One of my questions was, when will the non-tribal entities who applied to be part of the tribal burn be funded or be awarded their funding? So that was my first question. And then my second question is the non-tribal entities who requested to be part of the tribal burn, and because of the funding, the way the funding ended up happening at the last minute, are they still considered a part of that burn? And then my third question was, when will we as a whole know when the organizations that are being funded, like when will we know when that timer starts, when they're awarded the funding and now they're to uphold the chapter 944 rules? When will we know that takes place so we can start referring people to those services? Will there be an announcement in our counties, or how will we actually know when that starts? Thank you.
Yeah, Sabrina, this is Steve. So I think I can give a brief answer for the first 2 questions, and then I think we'll have to get back to you on the third, unless somebody on this in this meeting has the information. So in terms of the tribes, as if you recall, the tribes had a set aside, and that's one source of funding for the tribes to pursue and to fund and support the Measure 110 work. There was also a section within the offering for tribes to come forward and request additional monies. And unfortunately, due to an error in the process, no funding was set aside. If you recall, the allocations were for county regions. There was no tribal region set aside for that. And so to work towards to correct that error, OHA worked with the 2 tribes that came forward, and we were able to dedicate some non-Measure 110 funds to support those efforts, not fully, but to the extent that we could. And so those particular investments fall outside of Measure 110 and the Oversight and Accountability Council, because they were funded with funds other than Measure 110. And so that that work will not be considered burns, behavioral health resource networks, and they don't fall, and that work also doesn't fall under the parameters of the council, if that helps in that regard. And in terms of just acknowledging when folks are up and running, I don't believe, Kristen, that we have a process for that yet, but happy to work with you all on that as organizations get up and running.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question will be kind of dependent on when a county was approved, when they received their funding, and when they're really able to get up and running. And that is going to be probably 250 different answers. I will say that many of the approved applicants have already started to receive their first tranche of funding. And a couple others are still waiting on MOUs to come together, grant agreements to be signed. But we have been getting payments out to folks within 20 days of having a signed MOU and a signed grant agreement on file. So I think in some of those earlier counties, people are providing services. And of course, these are all established providers. So they have been doing some kind of work and are going to continue to do some of that work. And just really ramping up what they're able to do as funding becomes available.
I just wanted to jump in just to get clarity on one thing, and then I see Caroline and Sabrina with your hands up. But just to be clear, we did vote to set aside $2 million. Am I hearing that somebody just forgot to actually set it aside, or am I thinking of access to care? I got a little confused by that.
The council set aside 4% of the remaining after the access to care grants for the tribes, which is about $11.2 million for the 9 federally recognized tribes and the Urban Indian Health Program, NARA, as I understand it. And Caroline can correct me. And that money was distributed based on a formula decided on by the tribes, based on a criteria that they developed, and it has been distributed separately than from what I believe that Steve is talking about.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay, Caroline?
So yes, Sabrina, I think your contact person is George Lopez or Shonda. So they're the ones who've been on the calls. We've been meeting consistently for quite some time, having discussion about Measure 110. We all thought, the tribes thought that since the set aside was decided late last year, that those dollars would be in our hands, and they're not. So throughout that time, there was different formulas that were being used for the final amount. And there was some major internal discussion when the IHS the user pop changed, which then I think for Klamath, it was like a 1,000 user population different. And so Shonda contested that. So we all went back and we use a combination of 2 user populations. So we gave the higher of the 2 that were recorded. Unfortunately, a lot of folks don't understand what the user population is, but with COVID, it was very difficult in order for a lot of people to be able to be seen. And the user population is very important in Native American communities because that kind of gauges how many people we're serving. That's the amount that we were using. And for some tribes, that was a disadvantage when they weren't able to open up the doors because of the COVID. So that's been resolved. And it's my understanding those contracts are being worked on now, and that they're going to go underneath Julie Johnson and her new team that she's building up. And they'll be working with the tribes to work on their final plans to see how much of the burns, the areas, the different elements that they're able to do this first year. Because for some of the tribes, they don't even have a program established. So some things are going to be done a little bit differently, but it's going to be coming, it will go underneath behavioral health with the tribe underneath Julie Johnson. So that's the direction that the tribes are going. Oh, and another thing, are we agreeing not to meet next week because we got our work done? Can we miss 1 week? Because even if we don't, I'm not going to be here next week anyway. So I think we deserve a week off. Just 1 week. I'm done.
Don't we have a meeting on September 1st?
That's tomorrow. That's
oh,
a
that's
wrap.
in this week. Okay, cool.
That's right. Yeah, there was an overwhelming support last week for us to take next week off. Unless there's someone that has a burning, unless someone has a burning desire to meet next week. But I'm struck by what you just said there, Caroline, regarding the money not getting out to the tribes yet. Is there anticipated that it's coming soon, or have decisions been made?
The decision was made with the tribes to agree with combining the 2 user populations. One came out late last 2021. It was a 3rd quarter report, and that's what we based the distribution. This is the recommendation I made also to do it with the counties, to go population based. That's what we did with the tribes. Mm-hmm. However, a new one came out I think mid-summer of 2022, which was different. And so that's where I think the internal discussion occurred, especially with Klamath. They would have lost 1,000. It was close to 1,000. I mean, it wasn't 1,000 exactly, but they would have lost something like 1,900 and they had 2,900, something like that. So we all agreed to recalculate and make sure that Klamath got the higher population number. So then we have to adjust everything again. But it's my understanding those contracts are supposed to go out. They said within 2 weeks, and that discussion happened more than a week ago. So I'm assuming those they should be coming out now.
Oh, great. Okay. So you anticipate the funding coming relatively soon?
And we can be happy to give you all an update on September 14th if we're taking next week off when we reconvene.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that I understand. Thank you, Carolyn, for all the information. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that OHA was able to come in and provide supported funding to help these entities in the time. But I just wanted to also make sure that I understood they're not exactly bound by the Chapter 944 rules because they're not actually part of a burn. Is that correct?
They will all start to become a burn, but the expectation is the fact that they're not going to be able to reach all the elements because we're all set up differently. So we don't have the same providers that the county has access to in order to create a county wide burn. We don't have all those same type of providers per tribe. And so we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. The only possible Warren Springs, we can because we're a mental health authority and have been a mental health authority since I think 1979, 1980. So we already have our letter of approval. We already have most of the components to create a burn with the exception of the employment area. So that's the one we're going to have to work on. But some of the other tribes don't have letter of approvals, and some of them are getting different sources of fund from OHA, but we're the only mental health authority. So the other tribes, some of them just don't have those providers in order for them to meet every element that we are requiring the counties. And so it's going to have to be done a little bit differently. However, all the tribes have varying degrees in terms of providing services for substance use as well as mental health, because all of us are getting Indian Health Service dollars at least for some of that, but none of us are getting enough dollars to do a complete job without some additional dollars. So these additional dollars is going to actually help some of the basic stuff that most of the tribes already have in place. So this should expand the services to start providing some of the other elements that we weren't able to do because there wasn't sufficient funds. Does that come out okay? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn, for all the information. I really appreciate it.
Any other questions folks have? Okay, so I think that's it for our agenda. And then I guess we're taking next week off. We will be back the week after that. So I hope everybody does something different on their Wednesday next week. And thank you all for coming today. Oh, Dharma, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get my hand up before you said that. But I was wondering, now that we funded all of the counties, if we could get like a summary of the information that was kept confidential to the Measure 110 inbox. Since we've made those funding decisions now, I think it would be important to just be able to access that now.
I agree. I know that's something that has been discussed, and I think Jessica was working on that. I don't know, Steve, do you have anything else around that?
I don't, but it makes sense. I would just look to Allison or Shannon or OCMP or contracting procurement folks to see whether there's any outstanding issues that would delay. But I think barring that, I think the sooner we can get that into your hands, the better.
Any other questions, Dharma? Okay, well, Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we will see you in